Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Today we're talking about the NBA draft in the class's most versatile defenders. Victor Wembanyama is going to go number 1. Brandon Miller, a top pick as well, could go number 2 or 3. Versatile defender. But there's a lot of guys throughout, first round, potential lottery guys, late first, second round picks that, they end up panning out in the NBA and getting consistent opportunities because of their defense. Kyle, who comes to mind to you first as one of the draft class's most versatile defenders?
So many to pick from, and such an important skill set to stay on the floor in the playoffs, because if you're getting picked on, you're going to sit down very frequently. There's one quickly I want to mention, which is Andre Jackson, who was on the national championship team for UConn. He took on tough assignments. He gives you a lot of, he's also is like a high assist to usage guy, one of the highest marks in the country. He gives you a lot of assists. He's great. One of the higher upside guys, though, that is probably, he's projected in the top 10 is Houston freshman Jarace Walker. Walker's 6'8", and he measured at a 7'2" wingspan. He's built a lot like Patrick Williams, who came out of Florida State. In fact, I've said this to you before, Kevin, but it made me wonder why he fits the prototype of a Florida State type guy. Like I wondered why he didn't go there, but won a steal a game and 1.3 blocks per game, and that was 91st and 93rd percentile in the country. He's a guy who can move his hips really well, and in a league that is like spread out, we kind of had this movement towards lanky guys that could fly around, and I think we've shifted more towards, hey, strength is in fashion. It's important. It's nice to have strong guys that can move. Walker fits that mold, and I think he has enough offensive upside that I think he could become a winning player in the NBA.
Yeah, and he was in a winning culture at Houston. I love Sampson. I think he did a great job with him by giving him opportunity. He also didn't have to worry about being a mainstay of the offense. But as the year went on, there were times where you're like, Walker's maybe the most dependable player on the court for this team, which speaks to what he can do eventually in the NBA. And I like him on the defensive end because of that force and that size that he has.
I mean, and he's just so competitive. I guess that's probably one of the reasons why he went to Houston. That's a team that competes hard on defense, and Walker coming out of IMG, he's just one of those guys. You don't need to activate him or turn him on. He's always on the defensive end.
And he can play in a system, right? I mean, that's the other thing.
It's almost a good sign if you go to Houston, because if you agree to go to Houston, what you're signing up for, what you're signing up for. So it's like if you go there, you're telling me that you're a competitive. It's very similar to Florida State, honestly, in that way that that just says something about him. And I think it's another check in the box for him, personality-wise.
When I was in Houston interviewing, Brandon Miller from the Alabama side, and then various Houston players, Marcus Sasser, Terrence Arsenault, a freshman wing for that team. I asked Arsenault, why Houston? He's like, because we compete here. I want to learn how to be a professional. And that's this common thread that you hear from a lot of the guys there. And with Jarace Walker, he's got defense as a foundation. That's why he's going to be a lottery pick. But offensively, he actually, I think in high school, he was taking the pull-up jumpers. He handled the ball a bit more. His offensive role was more expansive than what we saw at Houston. But at-rim finishing, Tate, he's a connective piece as a passer. I think Walker has a lot of qualities that are going to make him a versatile piece on the offensive end, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what you tell yourself, right? The floor is he's going to be a great defender and a nice rotation piece in the playoffs. But the ceiling is he could turn into a guy who could be a secondary, potentially primary option if all things go according to plan and he develops into the player that he possibly could be. And he's young. He's a freshman, right? So, I mean, that's always something that NBA GMs love. We love potential. We don't always like players, but we love potential.
I have Walker on my board at number 8. And a player that has surpassed them at number 7 is Taylor Hendricks out of UCF. Hendricks, another freshman, not as highly ranked out of high school as Jarace Walker was, but Hendricks very similarly on the defensive end of the floor. He's somebody who can block shots for you. He's a good help defender inside. I could see him in a situation where you have him playing next to a big true center. He's playing the 4 for you as your big, long, rangy help defender. He can switch and defend multiple positions. There's a foundation for Hendricks to be one of those versatile pieces on your defense. And you look around the playoffs, I mean, the Aaron Gordon types, those guys are highly valuable to constructing a positive overall defense for your team. And I think Hendricks checks those boxes. And plus, he's just tough, man. He takes charges. He fights hard. He's constantly has a high motor. Both Walker and Hendricks are super impressive, but I give a slight edge to Hendricks.
Yeah, and he has a wide variety, a wide range. He's like a nice button-up that you could wear with some slacks or some jeans, You can dress him up, dress him down, that kind of thing. I don't know if that works or not, but we'll say that it does.
It's a good analogy. I like
So,
it. Yeah.
but I think another thing, too, if you could reach back and look for, like, skill sets that we want to look for on the offensive end, you want to kind of get guys who have had the ball in their hands and they've processed a lot of action in front of them. They can make decisions. They can see the board. And on defense, I think in some cases, we've talked before about like Taylor Hendricks played center a lot when he was growing up. Paolo Banchero, another guy that played center a lot, had a lot of connectivity kind of in his brain. I think that he's going to be able to give you some of that like anticipation off ball, getting to the scene of the crime before the Minority Report thing before it takes place. That's a really valuable skill in a fast-paced game that is really, really intensive on decision-making in the NBA.
And coached by Johnny Dawkins, a guy who knows how to, basically get guys in the right position so you understand what it means to be this type of player. And then you mentioned some of the comps. I mean, even like what Rui Hachimura is doing on Jokic.
Yeah,
I think, Hendricks could be that kind of guy where he can match up with the big, but he also can get out on the perimeter if you need him. And that's a really valued skill set once you get to the playoffs.
And for me, the reason why he's one spot ahead of Jarace Walker is because of the confidence in his jumper. He's 39% from three, much better than Walker from behind the arc. So I think for Hendricks, he's somebody that you could plug him in. He can be a spot-up shooter for you. He can attack closeouts, straight-line drives. He can roll to the rim. You mentioned him playing center more in high school. Good finisher around the basket. I just see him as one of those plug-and-play guys who can operate in different roles for your offense or for your defense and is going to have a long, successful NBA career. Tate, anybody come to mind to you as one of the most versatile defenders in the class?
Well, one of the names that I want to mention, then I'll get into my main guy, but Jalen Clark of UCLA is the best defender I saw in college basketball this year. So I wanted to say his name. I don't know if he might end up going back to UCLA, but
they missed him after he got hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, he was the difference maker, and if they had him against Gonzaga, we might be talking about the Bruins, being the national champions. No offense to the UConn fans. I know they'll be upset about that, but that's how talented he is. But the name that comes to mind for me is a fringe guy. I think he's number 40 on your KOC's big board. His name is Jordan Walsh, and he's not the name that you would hear a lot when you talk about Arkansas. Obviously, there were more high-profile guys that are there. You talk about Nick Smith, you talk about Anthony Black, but Jordan Walsh was my favorite player on this team because of his competitiveness, to be quite honest with you. And I like the way that he carried himself on the court. And one specific example that I remember, he picked up Ryan Nembhard, who just transferred to Gonzaga, little brother of Andrew Nembhard. He picked him up full court when Gonzaga played Creighton, and Creighton ended up winning that game, but that changed the dynamic of that game. And I love Jordan Walsh's versatility to be able to guard a guard, to be able to guard a wing. And if he gets switched on a big, he has the competitive nature that he will be willing to match up with them. He's 6'6". I like his ability to develop into a shooter, and he shot 48% day one of the combine from the three-point line. So Jordan Walsh is a guy that I know he might not be a flashy guy, but you're talking about a second-round pick that can be really, really of value for you.
Lanky, lean strength, I think, is something that you see guys that can get into traffic and get balls and pull them out. Like Kawhi is the highest example of this. I see your example, and I'll add you another example that we watched together in that Arkansas tournament game against Kansas. Walsh was switching him and David McCullough, another guy that I really love for Kansas, who I think could stick. It wouldn't surprise me if he sticks in the league for like 10 years. That guy is a really competitive, great player. But Walsh had a couple of possessions where he was on Jalen Wilson, and he switched between him and Grady Dick and just took them out of the game down the stretch in the second half of that game with his length. And you could tell that it really threw Jalen Wilson off in the second half of that. And, I think his wingspan's over 7'2". He's somebody that if he can get the shooting up, he's going to be a pain of a defender.
And he's a legit 6'6". I think he measured in at 6'6" without shoes. So, I mean, this is a big kid who can make, winning plays, right? And if you ask an Arkansas fan who their favorite player was on the team from last year,
Walsh.
They'll say Walsh or Devo Davis, right? Those are the two answers. So they're not the two guys that are higher up on the draft board.
And with Walsh, I mean, I've flirted with him as a first-round pick, but what's held me back is the shaky jumper. So for teams that, we see him having success at the NBA draft combine, if teams are bringing him into group workouts or individual workouts and they're like, okay, he's finally figured out how to become a consistent spot-up shooter. Like Walsh, his defense is going to be enough for him to get chances into a second contract, possibly a third contract. It's that good on defense. If the jumper is good, he's going to make a lot of money
Absolutely.
in the NBA and be on the floor like end of games.
Let me ask you this. If we did a redraft in the Herb Jones draft, would he be a first rounder? Would he be a fringe lottery player, do you think?
I think so, even though the jumper still is streaky. But he's improved it enough that he's not like a total liability. He can at least hit shots for you.
And you think Walsh is 19 years old. Herb was like 23 when he came into that draft.
Sure.
So you think, okay, 4 years from now, is Walsh going to be a dependable enough shooter? I think so. Are they going to bet on him? Probably. The question is how big. So,
and the thing is, when you pull up Walsh's high school video, like he can do a little bit off the dribble.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something there. He's not just somebody like who spots up and doesn't drive the ball at all. He can attack off the bounce for you and make the right pass, or just throw his body into the paint. He's unafraid around the rim. I think there's a real chance Walsh ends up one of the major steals if he falls into the second round.
Right, and they were giving him Shane Battier comps throughout the year. I thought that was great, and I will say, if I just close my eyes, what team does he end up on? He feels like a Boston Celtic. I really think so.
Wow!
I feel like Brad Stevens would love Jordan Walsh, and I don't know how the workout went, but I bet it went pretty well. KOC.
I mean, we'll see. Early first round, lot of good fits in that early first round this year. I mean, you got Boston at 35. San Antonio at 33. If they get Wemby number one, maybe
good team. It feels like a good team's going to get him. It just does.
OKC at 37. Lot of good fits in that.
With his old teammate, Jalen Wood. Well, I guess not his old teammate, his old alma mater mate.
Absolutely. lot of options there for Jordan Walsh, and a lot of potential teams going for steals in the early second round. Kyle, Tate, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, KFC.